Hey, Blake T. Wild here, and welcome to another exciting addition to my coverage of the Ultimate Universe. The old one, not the new one being spearheaded by Lil Johnny Hickman to massive success. This is still from a time where Mark Millar and Brian Michael Bendis were spearheading the Ultimate Universe to massive success. And if you haven't seen my videos on the first 2 volumes of Ultimate X-Men, check them out! I also have a couple playlists regarding the Ultimate Marvel Universe, one of which is in a chronological order that I think makes sense. And of course, don't forget to leave a like for the persecution of mutants. And subscribe for more content just like this. Released in 2002, written by Mark Millar and Chuck Austin for 2 issues, with art by Adam Kubert and Chris Bachalo, and Asad Ribic for 2 issues. This is X-Men Volume 3, World Tour. And this begins in a really weird place. The first 2 issues of this volume introduce none other than the Cajun Persuasion, a Gambit, a Bonjour No Cher, and it adds nothing to any of the other issues or the story arc in this volume. It just says, hey, Gambit's an alright guy. He saves this little girl whose parents were murdered by criminals. Also, mutants exist outside of the X-Men and whatever Magneto was doing in the Savage Land with his incestuous kids. And it doesn't matter, really, because Gambit won't be back into the series until 2005 in issue 50. So with that out of the way, the actual storyline doesn't begin until the 4th issue in this volume, because Ultimate X-Men 15 is a weird word processor recap of the state of the world and what it's like for mutants. It's for an article. It's an epistolary story because it's being written by one of the characters. And here we go. It starts off with a classic high school graduation speech. The Oxford English Dictionary describes mutation as blah 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 blah. Guess who's writing this? The answer may surprise you. We see the X-Men living their lives at the mansion. They play baseball because, hey, that's something that people love in the mainstream universe, and it's an X-Men classic. I really hope that the first post-Krakoa X-Men story opens up with the group playing baseball. Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, has also been using her psychic powers to assist mental institutions as well as the police in finding missing persons. The school itself is also growing larger as Storm, Cyclops, and others work on better controlling their powers and gaining a proper education. And Beast, well, Beast continues his passion for research into an alternative to expensive pharmaceuticals, and also starts chatting with a girl online. And Wolverine and Colossus have also struck up a friendship. But in the world outside of the mansion and the school, mutant culture scares the values of humanity. Spike Lee is also making a Magneto biopic. Bolivar Trask goes on television to expand upon his theory that mutants are inherently cruel due to their evolution, and the Brotherhood of Mutants has reemerged and recently bombed the Japanese financial district. And eventually, sometime in the fall or winter, I think, Xavier goes to the park with Colossus, and it's there that he reveals to Peter that Magneto is still alive, living out his life with no memory of who he truly is or what he's done. Magneto now thinks that he's just regular Eric Lenscher, a teacher from the Bronx. Also, Cyclops and Toad are still friends, because in the first volume, Cyclops goes undercover with Magneto's group, and I guess these two just struck up a friendship, and now they still chat on the phone, but I feel like that shouldn't be happening. Xavier shouldn't let them do that because, you know, Toad is part of a terrorist group. Also, it's revealed that the girl that Beast was talking to is actually the Blob, catfishing him. And now, in present day, Xavier sits on the back patio watching the sunset as Bobby Drake arrives to inform him that the magazine that Xavier wrote the article for claimed it was too pro-mutant and did not run it. Then sometime later, a ship is found off the coast of Scotland by some police or whatever, and inside they find a plethora of mangled bodies, and the captain orders that Dr. McTaggart be alerted that the crew is dead and her son is nowhere to be found. But then they discover a survivor. The captain orders everyone to move back and cover their eyes, and the captain pleads with David McTaggart to come with them, because he can't survive 24 hours away from his mother's hospital. And then the man's eyes glow green as the captain realizes what's being done to him. The captain then guns down all of his men, blasting one over the side. Then he takes a running start and jumps to shore and makes his way inland. Cut to jolly old London, innit? 2 days earlier. Jean and Aurora rollerblade through the streets as they're in London to promote Charles Xavier's new book. He's going on an international tour, hence the title, X-Men World Tour. Anyway, Jean notices a woman carrying a loaded gun in a brown paper bag. Later that night, in Soho, the X-Men hang out in a club as Bobby talks to his parents over the phone. Wait a minute! That newspaper title says Captain America Alive? Meaning that these first 3 volumes, at least, of Ultimate X-Men take place before the Ultimates. Oh man, I gotta go rearrange my chronological playlist. Anyway, Wolverine takes the phone and tries to talk to the parents, who are freaking out that Bobby's overseas, and then they chastise Wolverine, and he hangs up. Then Wolverine tells him to keep the phone away because they're on a drug bust, and Wolverine wants to upstage Cyclops. Elsewhere, Beast and Cyclops walk through the rain as they're trailed by a gang of ruffians. And 2 days later at the Ritz, Xavier calls their deadline to an end, and they take a look at how their superheroics have been reported by the press. Jean and Storm took down an IRA cell, Wolverine, Colossus, and Iceman busted an international drug ring, and Beast and Cyclops stopped some muggers, which wasn't reported on, but Beast completed the Times crossword in record time. Storm makes fun of them, but Xavier says that Beast and Cyclops actually passed their assignment. Their goal with this exercise was to save lives, and Beast and Cyclops did just that by finding a peaceful way to help the gang members, even checking 2 of them into a rehab clinic.
I did not form this school to train an army of thugs, Iceman. How can I tour the world asking for change when my students are clinging to the politics of the ape man? I don't like prisons. I don't like capital punishment. I don't like mutants dropping car-sized hailstones on unsuspecting Irishmen. Those who we interact with are all part of a species we're trying very hard to ingratiate ourselves with. Gaining the trust of Homo sapiens is integral to our agenda, my X-Men. Phase 3 was designed to promote pacifist alternatives to traditional human problems. Don't give them any more excuses to hate us.
Later, after Xavier gives a presentation which is met by a massive mob of anti-mutant humans and a Molotov is set off, the X-Men head to their hotel. And the next day, Jean discovers that Colossus has checked out at 3 a.m. and left to the airport with a man and a woman. Beast asks what Xavier's thoughts on the situation are, but then he gets a call from Moira McTaggart, who informs him that her hospital on Muir Island in Scotland has been destroyed. 2 agents of the British division of S.H.I.E.L.D. called Strike have placed her under arrest, and their son, David, has escaped. Sometime later at Muir Island, the X-Men arrive and are greeted by Dr. McTaggart. Well, all of the X-Men except for Cyclops and Marvel Girl, who are tracking down Colossus in Russia. Moira then shit-talks Xavier for not even being able to complain about her losing their son, because he's currently in a trance-like state whilst he conducts an astral form search for David. Meaning that if he ever wants to just get out of a conversation or pretend like he doesn't know somebody's there so he doesn't have to talk to him, he can just have one of the X-Men say that he is in a trance astral projection form while Xavier just sort of sits there. Moira and her employees then lead the X-Men into the hospital. Moira reveals that this facility is actually a few months older than the New York operation of Xavier's, and that the people who fund Charles's work hope that some of the people here will graduate to their Westchester facility. Storm brings up that Xavier told them that he got all that equipment and the mansion from his parents. And Moira just laughs in her face that they fell for the inheritance gimmick. And Wolverine demands to know why the hell they're all here and who David is. So she explains that David's X-gene powers didn't manifest until a few days after Xavier left them to found the Savage Land Sanctuary with Magneto. David's minimal control of his powers caused his body to deteriorate at the slightest use of his abilities, meaning that Moira had to keep him sedated and under careful monitoring for years. But last night, he began convulsing and transferred his consciousness into a doctor's body. Moira doubts that it was a coincidence that all this happened at the same time of Xavier returning to Britain. Then, 2 agents from the S.H.I.E.L.D. UK division, Strike, appear. Agents Braddock and Thomas. Yup, this is the ultimate Betsy Braddock, aka Psylocke. Iceman asks who the heck Strike are, and Agent Thomas explains that they're a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. Specifically, they're here because Betsy is a Psi Division agent. And then he tells the young Ice Boy to picture him as a real-life Welsh James Bond. Bobby asks who the hell the Welsh are, and Betsy tells him that they're like the Irish without the laughs, or the Scots without the sex appeal. Excuse me? Have you not seen Alex Jones? Not her worth, of course, but come on, who doesn't love a Welsh accent? I was going to try to do one until I realized I absolutely cannot. Anyway, Xavier wakes up in that moment and alerts everyone that David is in Aberdeen. Cut to a Burger King in Aberdeen. The boiling, ruinous body of the police captain shuffles into the shop and orders a large fry, 2 cheeseburgers, and an ice cream before crumpling over in pain as he cries out that he can't think straight. And outside, Xavier and the others stand guard, with Xavier telepathically ordering his son to stay calm and relax. Just close his eyes, because before he knows it, he'll be back home with Mum. Wolverine heads in first, but outside the ground erupts, and Xavier is launched into the sky and back into the ground. Then Wolverine turns around and discovers that the other patrons have all been immolated. Wolverine snicks his claws through David, but David is able to take over his mind. Outside, Betsy alerts the others that she lost telepathic contact with Logan, and then he explodes through the roof and lands on the X-Jet, as David shouts that he's found a brand new home in this unkillable body. But this being an amalgamation of both David Haller, aka Legion, and Kevin McTaggart, aka Proteus, he also has reality warping powers, and locks Beast in a cage of an ethereal freak show. He equally defeats Iceman with demonic hallucinations of Magneto and the Brotherhood, before Storm strikes him directly with a lightning bolt, and Betsy launches a psychic grenade into his brain. But he manages to escape, leaping away into a road where he's struck by a lorry, but not before he swaps consciousness with the driver. The truck slams over Wolverine and continues speeding away. This episode is brought to you by my Patreon and my comics, Destructo Boy and the Custodians Agents of Cross. Each issue of the Custodians Agents of Cross is over 60 pages of pure comics, written, illustrated, colored, lettered, designed. Everything you see in these books was created entirely by myself. And this asks the all-important question, what if the only heroes that can save the world are an intelligent baboon, a girl who controls fire, the world's smartest man with the power of elasticity only in his right arm, and a 4-armed werewolf? And this just follows their exploits. Like I said, it is a love letter to the 60s, Silver Age, and to all of comics in general. As you'll see as the series progresses to its 6th and final issue. This entire first issue, however, is posted in its entirety on my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey's videos, where you can read the entire thing for only $2. Normally this book, I sell it for $15, which already is a far better deal than anything you're getting from Marvel or DC these days. But as little as $2 a month, you can get access to the entire issue. And I am serializing issue 2 as we speak. But that's not all, because I also have my sci-fi, zany, just crazy fun series, fun for the whole family, all-age comic, Destructo Boy. Destructo Boy follows this little robot guy right here as he lives on a giant space station in the far-flung future, and he battles crime, giant robots, giant monsters, and evil conquerors from space such as Grimlax the Astro Knight. Each of these issues just introduces as much zany sci-fi craziness as I could fit into these books. They're being serialized on my Patreon as I speak as well, and you can pick up all 5 issues on my Etsy shop, blaketwild.etsy.com. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, Russia, Scott and Jean locate Peter near his apartment complex, and he explains that he's tired of being ignored, underappreciated, and he's especially sick of Xavier's pacifist ideas. And then he walks away. Later in Berlin, the X-Men and Strike agents continue tracking down David, much to the chagrin of Bobby and Storm, who would rather be chilling out on an international book tour in high-class hotels and beaches. And Bobby also notes that S.H.I.E.L.D. is apparently sending out their new super team, the Ultimates, which means that this happens it's like pretty much during the Ultimates 1. Probably, I'm so confused. Where do I put these videos? Anyway, Professor X and Betsy strike up a conversation and kind of flirt around, which is weird, but not for the reasons that you think. And eventually they do go out to a dinner where Xavier recounts his ex-wife and their marriage. He tells Betsy how he graduated from Glasgow University. No, he is not from the UK. Xavier is an American, just like in the mainstream comic universe. He just went to school there. And he got married to Moira 3 weeks later. Moira then designed an early version of Cerebro, and they established a very rudimentary institute at Mirror Island. And eventually, they met Eric Lensher, aka the man who would one day be known as Magneto. They instantly hit it off and became almost like brothers. Xavier notes that there wasn't really one catalyst that caused him to leave his family. It's kind of just a slow and steady process of sadness. When he did leave, however, he thought he was doing his family good, and that they wouldn't really miss him. And that's when he and Eric founded their small island in the southern hemisphere, the Savage Land Sanctuary, which is not its official name, that's just what I call it. And that's where things fell apart. Magneto left Xavier crippled, investors approached Xavier to fund his school in New York, and the rest is history, aka volumes 1 and 2. Betsy asks if Xavier feels responsible for David, that perhaps his leaving is what caused David's powers to begin, and Xavier says,
Not really. They were going to happen anyway, of course. What I do feel guilty about was not being there to guide him at an age when I think he needed me most. I had no shortage of love for my son, you know. Like an owner's love for a pet sometimes, but love nonetheless.
So close! We were so close to not having to put this video in my Professor X is a terrible person playlist. I mean, it's pretty bad what he did to Moira and David, you know, leaving his family, but he could have redeemed himself. He's not gonna, but he could have. Also, I'm not going to cover it just for the sake of the length of this video, but the whole Colossus storyline revolves around Jean and Scott trying to convince him to help save a sunken submarine. Colossus refuses until one night he's with his family and the news flips on and they're discussing the event and how time is running out for the members. And Colossus has a change of heart when his younger siblings sort of look up to him and ask him if he's going to save the day. And he goes and lifts the submarine from the ocean floor. Anyway, still in Berlin, the X-Men and Betsy search for David. The X-Men drive around in the middle of the night to pick up Colossus, Jean, and Scott from the airport, and Storm wonders if Xavier ever messes with their minds. He has! And he does! He's a terrible person! I have a whole playlist about it! The next episode of What Is all about it. Anyway, Bobby points out that every time they do go into battle with Xavier's creepy psycho son, or even any villain that's not a 2-bit criminal, he loses his lunch. And Beast remarks that, hey, maybe Xavier's giving him the jitters so they can have that exact argument be made. Wolverine then tells everyone to shut the hell up, because there's someone in the road ahead of them. Betsy Braddock, currently under the control of David McTaggart, carrying his mother, father, and a dog. David then calls them all idiots and pulls a Sam Reich.
I've been here the whole time!
And then David shifts into this weird knockoff Pinhead from Hellraiser look. What is this? Why does this look so familiar? What am I thinking of? It's gotta be a comic. I can't remember. He almost looks like Trencher or one of those characters, but this just looks like something that I can't think of. So let me know if you have any ideas in the comments. Wolverine orders everyone to get the hell out of the car and tries to slam the car into David, but David launches it into a pub and then laughs maniacally. Beast leaps into action and David throws him through a window and into a room where 3 attractive young women, a teacher, and the 2 hottest girls that he knew in high school are waiting for him. David says that he can give Beast a reality where all of this X-Men stuff never happened. A place where he can be happy and normal and get with any girl he wants. All he has to do is help him kill the others. Beast refuses, and David then pummels him to a pulp as Storm erupts her powers at him, and Iceman forms into a massive frozen monster of himself, only to be slammed through by 2 vehicles. Then Cyclops and Jean arrive, and Cyclops blasts David into a cinder, but it doesn't last, and David begins tearing them apart. Then he teleports himself and Xavier and the dog around the world to the various stops on Xavier's book tour, exploding each location. Paris, Madrid, Rome, Sydney. Around the world, hundreds are suddenly dead. and as David prepares to make it thousands. Betsy regains control. She reveals that she's been systematically short-circuiting his brain, and now she's shutting him down for good. David fights back as his form falls apart and reality is torn asunder. Betsy tells Xavier that she can't get him, and that it's up to Charles, and she orders him to give her a blood clot to the brain.
And here's where the plan goes to pieces. You English witch. You forgot you were dealing with doubly-blooded do right here, didn't you? He'd never renege on his pitiful morals.
Please, you're never gonna get another chance. I can't hold him back.
He's right. I'm sorry. I can't.
Just shut up and kill me.
My pleasure. Sometime later, at a graveyard on Muir Island, the X-Men and Moira attend the funeral of David McTaggart. Xavier and Moira then walk away as General Nick Fury waits to speak to them. And Xavier tells his ex-wife that he's realized just how young they are and what a terrible mistake this has all been. He explains that their son is dead. The only daughter of the Braddock family is dead. Bobby Drake is in an intensive care unit, and his parents have withdrawn him and are suing Xavier and told the press that he is a negligent danger to all of his students. And he didn't even cry at his own son's funeral. He pledges that this is all over. And as soon as he and the X-Men return to New York, he's disbanding the team, his school, and his very idea for mutant kind forever. Sometime later, the X-Men fight a group calling themselves the Acolytes in Auckland, New Zealand, while back in Westchester, New York, Professor X drafts a letter to Scott.
By the time you return from New Zealand, I will be gone. I apologize for not saying this to your face, but you know how we telepaths are with verbal confrontation. I'm leaving because I failed. Failed as a husband. Failed as a father. Failed as a teacher. My books and lectures told the world how man and mutant could live in harmony, but I now realize I was wrong. Only one species may sit atop the food chain because that is the natural order. And I'm glad the New York lecture was canceled. I couldn't bring myself to spout my claptrap with Iceman in a hospital bed. I'm glad new terror groups have formed, because what right did I have to subvert the ideals of the Brotherhood? My biggest conceit was the psychic rehabilitation of Magneto I intended. In retrospect, it's mind-boggling to think that I could make a man forget who he was in a vague hope that he might one day come to my way of thinking. That's why I plan to remove those blocks this afternoon. It's clear to me now that Magneto must be freed and nature allowed to take her course.
Excuse me? You're Charles Xavier, aren't you?
I'm sorry, why do you say that?
Oh, come on. You're in every newspaper and magazine in the world, and no offense, but you're kind of a unique-looking guy. I've actually seen you around here a lot lately. Do you happen to know one of the kids in my class?
I just come down to the park to clear away the cobwebs. I just find it reassuring to know I'm not the only teacher in the world struggling to deal with disadvantaged youngsters.
You know, I never thought about it. But I suppose we really do have the same job. Of course, my kids don't save the world or anything. Hey, listen. My name's Eric Lensher. I actually teach 4th grade at the Institute of Special Education in the Bronx. So what are you doing here? Really? I thought the X-Men were in New Zealand fighting some faction of the Brotherhood of Mutants.
Yes, the students are, but it's their last mission under my jurisdiction. As of midnight, I am closing the school.
Are you serious?
Unfortunately.
What about the whole pacifist mission you were telling people about in your book? Why turn your back on it now?
You're the man who claims to read the magazines and newspapers, Mr. Lensher. I'm sure you're aware of what happened. What my son committed. You can't take the blame for something your son did, Professor. There's just as many papers out there saying how things could have been worse if the X-Men hadn't stopped him. That's precisely my point. I was on an international lecture tour promoting a non-violent way of thinking, and my students neutralize an opponent by crushing him under a car. What do you mean? You're disappointed that Colossus resorted to murder? No. Not at all. I'm starting to think he might have actually been right. To be frank, I'm not sure what I believe anymore, Eric. Every other stage in evolution has been marked by bloodshed. Why should the twilight of the Homo sapiens be any different? Perhaps Magneto was right, and I'm just nothing more than a romantic idealist. My girlfriend actually read a thing online about Magneto and his tactics and how it was actually much more closer to a traditional human mindset. You know, smashing your opponents into submission is a pretty imperialistic idea for someone who claims to be the harbinger of a new golden dawn. And even the Brotherhood of Mutants are following your lead these days, getting what they want through compromise and negotiation. Wouldn't your quitting now just set everything back? I think you're rather overestimating my importance, Mr. Lensher. Look at me. Do I really strike you as the savior of the 21st century? I might go around talking about psychic rehabilitation and post-human economics, but I'm really just an emotional vacuum. David's death proved what an unfit father I was. How could I be trusted to shape the minds of the next generation when I couldn't even raise my own child properly? I'm a fraud. Anyone who thinks that my ideas have any merit need their head examined. Well, to be frank myself, I kind of take that as an insult, Professor. What are those? They're tickets to your lecture they canceled. I'm hanging on to them just in case they change their minds. You bought those tickets. You bought those of your own free will. At $49 a pop, it's quite hard to believe, I know. Professor, are you okay? Thank you, Eric. Thank you so very much.
Later that night, Xavier sits in his office and telepathically calls to the X-Men that class resumes officially tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The end. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this volume of Ultimate X-Men? We're at number 3 out of like 36 or however long this went for. I think it's pretty good. But for the most part, the first 3 issues are purely just filler into the grander story of things. Like I said, it doesn't really have anything to do with much. Gambit doesn't come back that long, and when he's there, he dies pretty quickly. The third issue, it's nice to see some, like, civilian sort of slice-of-life storytelling going on, aside from Beast being catfished by a cannibal. And I don't think that I don't think that the World Tour storyline is that good until, like, the last 2 issues or so. Mark Miller is a very talented writer. He's very good at making quick-paced, fast stories that just hook you and just drag you through the mud. And you can just get through them in a single sitting. They just move, go, 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 go. But there was something about this one that didn't have that same effect. It just didn't flow well for me like the others have. And the art shift, in general, also made it a bit difficult. After Chris Bachalo came on board, the pages just become a bit more clustered and just have far more panels on them. The art shift also affected the reading and kind of made it difficult to look at just due to the vast amount that was happening on the pages and the artistic ideas that he brought to those compositions. It does work quite well, however, for the scenes where David is fully unleashed. That hectic, manic composition style, it works perfectly for what's going on. It's just the more just regular things going on, like Professor X and Betsy at the dinner, or the X-Men hanging out searching for David, or Cyclops and Jean together. That didn't work as well. That sort of more toned down elements of the story don't fit, at least this era of his art. Overall, if I did have to rank the 3 volumes of Ultimate X-Men that I've covered so far, I'm going to say it's Volume 1, Volume 3, and Volume 2. What are your rankings of the ones, and what are your reasonings? I'm going with that order, even though I know I titled the video on Volume 1, the second worst X-Men story. I don't like it. I don't think it's that great, but it's still fairly enjoyable to at least see, like, Magneto and the Savage Land stuff, and you're seeing what mutants are like in this new universe. Volume 3 is unique in that it really begins the world building of the greater Ultimate Universe, specifically the mutant side of it, and it's also striving in new directions for the story that aren't just, we need to introduce the readers to these characters, we need to figure out who these characters are, and, you know, it's these early basic storylines. It's kind of like the Ultimates, Ultimates 2 specifically, where we're over that initial introductory hump, and now we can really start getting into stuff. People know who these characters are, they know what these versions of the characters are like, now let's fucking go. Volume 2 is just depressing. And the final issue is my favorite of this volume, with Magneto and Charles together. Magneto doesn't realize it, or does he? It's very well done. I really enjoyed that. That's why I played it all out in the video. It's easily my favorite part of this volume. These characters, like I said, are really starting to come into their own and developing into actual versions of the characters that we all know and love. They're becoming very established and finding their footing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, you know, where this goes moving forward. I've talked about it before. I have not read X-Men, Ultimate X-Men past pretty much this. I'm reading it as I'm going in these videos covering it. It's just one of the Ultimate series that I just never cared about. I've read all of the Ultimate Fantastic Four, all of the Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate X-Men I never bothered, never picked up. But anyways, let me know, again, what you thought. What are your thoughts on the characters, on where the story's going, on this volume? Again, how do you rank the volumes that I've covered thus far, 1, 2, and 3? And why? What are your reasonings? Again, let me know. And, of course, this is the Ultimate Year, where I'm covering just a bunch of Ultimate Marvel comics. So let me know specific storylines, like trade paperbacks, comics, whatever, issues even, like with the Ultimate Marvel team-up or whatever single issues there are. What Ultimate stories do you want me to cover? Let me know in the comments below. As always, like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at NotBlakeWild. Check out my Patreon for early access to videos, my comics, movie commentaries, art, stuff like that, at patreon.com/Smokey's videos. Check out my Etsy shop, BlakeTWild.etsy.com, where I'm currently selling Destructo Boy issues 1 through 5 on there as well. Every purchase comes with a free head sketch of any character of your choosing. And I will see you guys next time for another crazy X-Men story. Bye!